Good morning, ladies. Today we've got a fantastic program once again for you. We've got Rochelle Hampson here again this morning to talk to us about navigating the quest for perfection versus action. I was just saying before to Rochelle that it's something I really need today to hear because I'm really struggling with that particular aspect at the moment over the last 2 weeks with too many balls in the air and that constant strive for perfection, but not getting there, and then, you know, giving myself such a hard time for not actually being perfect. And I guess while I'm on the topic area of Rochelle, maybe I can just quickly introduce her to you, those of you that haven't linked in before. Rochelle Hampson is a psychologist. She works in private practice, and she's done so over the last 18 years. These days, she's also working as part of her practice as a wellness coach, and she works with her favorite group of women, those that's really kind of struggling with issues like stress, anxiety, burnout, lack of energy, insomnia, chaos, overwhelm. You know, we all have that overwhelm issue sometime, but it's all about helping us as women to actually find our mojo, and also to put ourselves first on the to-do list. I think we all kind of can have the opportunity to learn more about those things in this workshop series as well. And then, of course, she's got a whole range of formal qualifications as well, Master in Social Science of Criminology. That was in another life in law. She's been just a mentor and workshop presenter in so many places, been a keynote speaker at many opportunities and conferences out there as well. So Rochelle also did the WiRE program. So she's got her own business, and her other business apart from a psychology practice as well. So she can relate so well to everybody on this call today and during the series as well. So Rochelle, thank you very much for running this series for us. I think people are just absolutely loving it. And then I also want to, at this stage, introduce Karen Sauter. You will see her on the screen as Callan, and that's really part of her story, which she will also share with you. But she's an entrepreneur, she's a connector, she's an engager, she's a real support worker, and Little Red Tractor is her business. She's currently also part of the WiRE program. So, she's also know the WiRE environment and what's important to women and so forth. So she's got just a fantastic journey that when I spoke to her as well, I just thought, what a wonderful individual to have with us today and share her lessons learned, share her story. I have asked her to be vulnerable today as well, as I ask all my guests, and she's willing to do so. And she's written this lovely piece on that I've put on the website, just in terms of introducing her. And she describes herself as being so good at a chameleon, and changing herself according to others' expectations. But she's been through, many other challenges, personal challenges, but also obviously, as a lot of rural women have also experienced in terms of the floods and so forth. And then, of course, the droughts again, and then storms, and then the pandemic. But the pandemic has really, forced her to slow down. She works with women. She runs workshops for women in Gather. That's her particular trademark around that. And she's going to share her adventure with us today, and we're all looking forward to that, to learn her lessons. And then the last part of this workshop, again, in terms of the structure of the workshop, Rochelle will kick off with the workshop. Then we will pass over to Karen or Callan. And then the last part will be, once again, a safe place for everybody to share a bit about their journeys and their lessons learned as well. My name is Rita Weisner. I'm a professor at the University of Southern Queensland, and I teach and work in the area of management, organisational behaviour and entrepreneurship. And WiRE program director and founder, and just absolutely love this program. We've had about 2,500 women already engaging in various aspects of the program, and really love it that the brand is doing so well for itself out there, owing to word of mouth of our participants. So thank you very much for being part of WiRE program. Thanks for linking in this morning, and also being part of our community. I just want to mention that, again, as I do always at the moment in terms of our activities, the Queensland Government is currently funding this particular part of the WiRE project. And they are funding it through their Advancing Women in Business initiative. So thank you very much to the Queensland Government. They have been very, very supportive of the WiRE program really over the last 4 years. Just in terms of logistics, those of you that's been here, you know the drill, but I guess the most important aspect of this is you can use the chat button at the bottom if you want to make some comments or talk to the rest of the group, or you're welcome to unmute and ask questions as well during the presentation if you want to, or you can just put it into the chat and we'll pick that up that way as well. If you get kicked off owing to internet problems, just use the same link to come back on again. This particular workshop will be recorded, and I will share the link to the video with you in an email later this week or early next week, where you can also then, if you want to go and have a re-look at this this presentation, you can also do so. But the last session of where we share as a group, that won't be recorded. You will also be sent an evaluation form in the next few days. I can just really urge you to, it's only 5 minutes it'll take of your time, not even 5 minutes, 3 minutes. And it just helps us to give some feedback to our funders as to how you ladies find our workshops, and it helps us also with securing then future funding as well. So please help us in that regard. I just want to quickly mention the whole aspect of, it's very sensitive here at the moment on my screen. So this particular workshop series is part of our main theme currently about resetting and reimagining you and your business. We're currently here in workshop 4, Navigating the Quest for Perfection. We've got another one coming up then in a month, Stepping Out of the Imposter Syndrome. It's so relevant as well to all of us. And then workshop 6 will be Understanding the Motivation Puzzle. I also have some other workshops in the pipeline up until the end of the year. I've spoken to a videographer who will be doing a presentation for us for, when we promote ourselves and our ventures, how to do that with your own iPhone, and what are the issues that's important when you actually do that, and when you do that short little presentation to put yourself out there. I think that's maybe a very popular workshop as well. And then I've got a full-on workshop on use of social media by Tina Hay. She was also a presenter in our boot camp, so she's agreed to do a workshop on that. And also later in the year as well, and we are getting later in the year, there will be a workshop also on employability hacks. So it's those of you who's potentially still working on your business, but you're also looking for employment, because we all have to put food on the table and help our families. So it's helping you to be more employable. And if you apply for positions out there, what would be some employability hacks? We started the showcase series to really showcase our women in the WiRE program and their achievements, and letting others know that, if they can do it, you can do it as well. So welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. It's just a fantastic space every time I see that you ladies online, and I hope you enjoy this 2 hours with us. Rochelle, I'm going to pass over to you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and if you can just start sharing on your side, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. And I'm just going to get my technology happening, I hope. Okay, we're in business. Okay, so good morning, everybody. As Retha said, my name's Rochelle Hampson and I'm here in balmy Toowoomba today. It's really warm and quite strange and a bit unusual from the weather we've had in our previous weeks. So I'm feeling even a bit sweaty this morning, but that's okay. So as Retha said, today's topic is quite a pertinent one for all of us, and it's called perfection versus action. So you will find this morning as I launch into my slides that any of you that know a bit about yourselves and a bit about the perfectionism in yourselves are going to be triggered by my slides as they come through this morning. And that is all part of our process this morning, is to notice what is happening in yourselves as we progress through. So just be aware of how you react as we go through the slides this morning. So the little slide that the picture that I've included this morning was really, really interesting for me when I thought about this process, because I'm actually part of a business coaching group that is run by an American guy called James Wedmore, and his empire is enormous. And he when he launches a group program, he has 5,000 people each time enroll in his business course, and his empire is like a $10 million empire. And he sends out a little gift pack to all of his registration people, and in that business pack is a set of affirmation cards, and there they are. They're just a little box of cards, and on one of those cards, somebody noticed that this card obviously skipped through the whole spell check process, and it is just chockers with errors. And I don't know whether you can see it really well on your screen, but there's probably 5 typos just in that one card. And the people in his Facebook group just went crazy. They were all so triggered by the fact that somebody like him, this guru out there in the business world, could send out something that was just so imperfect. And it turned into just a fantastic conversation with thousands of people in that business group about taking imperfect action and really what's the end result. So I just thought that was a really cool way this morning of us just having a look at what even the people at the very top of the tree that we treat like gurus half the time, still things slip by, don't they? They get past us, and really, what's the end result? And that's where I want you to really think this morning and check in with yourselves is, well, okay, so somebody sent me some affirmation cards and one of them's full of typos. What do I think of that person? Does that mean I think less of them? Does that mean that that person is a failure? Does that mean that that person is no longer somebody I take seriously, or that I listen to, I don't want to follow him anymore because obviously he hasn't got his shit in a pile, so to speak. So, and look, we all know the logical, rational answers to that, don't we? That, of course, that is utter crap, that we are going to go, oh, look, everybody makes mistakes and that's fine. It doesn't matter. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's still, he's a brilliant guy and has great content and all the rest of it. But can you turn that lens on yourself when you are the one that can't get it perfect and you have to release something out into the world that might not be exactly the way you want it? Are you that kind to yourself, ladies? And Retha, you commented this morning that you're really struggling at the moment with all the balls in the air and having to let things go and not feeling very satisfied about it. So I would challenge you to use the same kindness that you would use on other people and the same permission that you go, look, it's okay in the end. It's not exactly how I like it, but it'll be okay in the end. So that's a really important start, ladies, for us to consider our level of kindness that we would use to other people and level of respect that people still command, even though they don't always get things right. So what actually is perfectionism? And like I said, be ready to be triggered as you read through my slides this morning. It's a need for everything to appear perfect, of course, which is unattainable, unrealistic, and sets you up to fail, feel overwhelmed, paralysed, feel not good enough, and ultimately often just quit the task at hand. So when we think about perfectionism, a lot of people will wear perfectionism as a badge of honour. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. And somehow that means that they are it's a word that you'll often hear people use in a job interview situation. Oh, I'm a real perfectionist. And they say that as if it's something to be very, very proud of. And employers go, ooh, okay, well, we know we're going to get great results from this person because they're a perfectionist. But and that's where it's the differentiation between, is it a behaviour or is it a personality trait, or is it a way of thinking about yourself that's actually not very helpful at all? So perfectionism is classified as a personality trait, and it's actually not a behaviour, because it's not something that we do. It is a way we think. Okay, and that often is a bit of a hard thing to get your head around. Is the behaviour is the end result of the thinking. Okay, and we'll go a bit more into the thinking in a minute, and I'll show you where you can notice where that perfectionistic thinking comes into play, that then comes out as behaviours down the track. So perfectionism isn't about high standards, it's about unrealistic standards. So I want that to be something that you really notice today in yourselves, that the differentiation is, it's not about being really somebody that wears that as a badge of honour. It's actually something that is, you're setting yourself up with standards that are just simply unachievable. And we'll go into that a little bit further down the track. So notice this morning, as I've said, about where your behaviour may be somewhat perfectionistic, and then we can often track back to that behaviour is an outcome of your thinking. Okay, so that's where it usually starts, is in your thinking, and then you get baffled by the behaviour. And as Aretha said, she gets stuck with all the balls in the air, and then she doesn't know which one to grab hold of, and she gets a bit paralysed then by, oh, what do I do first? Where do I go? And then sometimes we end up just doing nothing as a consequence, because we've become paralysed by the perfectionism, because our brain is telling us a story that I can't do this until it's right. Okay, so, and I also just want to make sure that we understand at this point what perfectionism isn't as well, because that's a really important thing that some of you might go, but I like to get things right. It's really important for me to get things right. And, you know, I like attention to detail, and I'm a very conscientious worker, and I like doing well. And that is a different story, because there's been quite a lot of research done between the difference between people who are perfectionists and people who are conscientious in their work styles and their behaviour and their high striving. And what that tells us is that those who are perfectionists in their thinking become paralysed and overwhelmed, and often this leads to depressive symptoms and anxiety and eating disordered behaviours and all sorts of manifestations of perfectionism along the way. And in the research, that becomes very apparent that folks who become paralysed by their perfectionism end up taking themselves down quite a strong rabbit hole of becoming quite unwell as a result of it, where, like I said, with the depression, anxiety, eating disordered behaviours, right down to even suicidal ideation, where people, especially young ones, become quite stuck that this is their identity, that they've got to get it right or that's it, nothing else matters, versus conscientious behaviour, which is more about, you know, I do my work, I keep up, I do the best I can, I'm attending to things as they come along, but I can be quite peaceful with myself as a result. So there's quite a strong delineation between the two. So it is important that you check in with yourselves about when does the line get drawn for you where you become paralysed, overwhelmed, and basically give yourself a really good beating, and then you don't get any result as a consequence of your high standards that you may inflict upon yourself. So it's important to understand the difference between the two, and sometimes it can be quite a fine line. So it's good to understand yourselves and check in with you about how the perfectionistic thought patterns may appear. And some of the examples I've given here are some of my own perfectionistic thought patterns, as well as some of the ones that I hear from other people on a really regular basis, where it just all tends to go to hell in a handcart as a result. Like, for instance, some of you ladies may identify with these things in your businesses at the moment, that I can't release this product until I know it's exactly right. And that process may then go on and on and on and on and on. And the product or the service or whatever it might be, or the website or the logo or the presentation or whatever it might be, just sits and sits and sits and sits and sits, and never actually reaches where it's meant to, because you're sitting on it because it's not quite perfect. And some of perfection comes up in, I've got to get everything running all at once. So in my world, we call that the all or nothing thinking. So it's got to be all done all at once and all right, or forget it. Don't bother about it. I just give up because obviously it's not good enough. So you can see where some of these start out kind of thoughts track back into a deeper sense of shame and a fear of failure. That's where perfectionism usually stems from for a lot of people. So some of it is about appearing in public, appearing on Facebook, doing lives, doing all of those kind of things, which we all seem to have a bit of a paranoia about. Is, I can't go on Facebook and do a live to advertise my business because I might sound like a goose, or I might have too many ums and ahs, or I might look funny, or other people might ask me questions that I might not immediately know the answer to. So I won't do it at all. I'll just avoid it. So we crash our own potential by setting ourselves up with these ridiculous expectations of ourselves, as opposed to just allowing ourselves to show our humanity, to show our customers and our clients and each other, most of all, I think, because women can be our own worst critics, that we are human and we are flawed and we love it, you know, whether it be in our bodies, whether it be in our businesses, whether it be in our friendships, our relationships, that we don't always get it right. And that's okay, because there is no rule out there that says, don't you dare appear in the business world until it's absolutely perfect. So, you know, continuing on with some of those examples, you know, like I said, some of these are mine. I can't get my logo right. People become obsessed by these minute details of their businesses, and therefore, well, how can I possibly do the rest of my business if I can't even get the logo right? I'm in another business group, and at the moment there's an obsession in that group about logos, because people were asked to share their logos, and it's becoming quite ridiculous how people are becoming paralyzed by this little symbol, this little tiny symbol that is allegedly meant to represent them and their business. And it's got to be perfect, or else I can't continue. And it's just such a important thing to keep intervening in those processes and saying, it's a logo. It doesn't actually matter in the long run. You are your business. Your logo is not your business. And I know it's important, but it's the level of importance that we place around that. So it's interesting also to notice that perfectionism will appear in different ways, will manifest for you in different ways. And one that people often don't notice in themselves and others is when it appears as anger. Because anger and frustration, where you are working at something and it doesn't work, and you find yourself stomping around the house, and the dishwasher won't load properly, and you've burnt the dinner, and you put your lipstick on this morning and it ends up halfway down your face, and you find yourself getting cranky about all these other sort of things, and you're thinking, what the hell's wrong with me? And it's often, oh, you're hormonal or something else. But often it is about that perfectionistic trait that's happening behind the scenes, that you have. All of those things will add up for you as this, well, I can't even get that right. So that's that all or nothing thinking again that we launch into. And it's really important to catch yourself using that kind of language on yourselves, the classic, well, I can't even get that right. How can I do anything else if I can't even get that right? I should be able to do that. And that's the should word. Is as soon as I hear anybody use should in their language, it's them, they're setting themselves up to fail. Okay, they're getting the whip out and they're whipping themselves with, I should be able to do this, or it shouldn't work, it should work, or it shouldn't be like this. There's a rule in there that you are listening to, and whether it be your rule, a family rule, a societal rule, there's usually some old story behind the scenes that you are adhering to, that is giving you that idea that you're meant to be perfect. Okay, and as a consequence of this stuff comes shame. And it's, as I've said on the slide, the shame from this stuff becomes the cruel irony, because the quest for perfection is often to alleviate the shame. So if I'm perfect and I appear perfect and my slides are perfect and I look perfect and I can speak perfectly without tripping over my words or anything else, then I am immune from criticism. That you ladies will go away today and go, oh my God, Rochelle's like amazing. She is just this uber cool presenter, and she'll probably do a TED talk next week because she's so good. And I will then go, okay, well, I did that really well. So those ladies aren't going to criticise me. So I'm protecting myself from any possible shame. That's when you dig right down under the layers of this stuff, is where you will find what is it that you are worried about? What is it that you are scared of are happening for you? So that's and that's a topic, I guess, when I work with, and look, perfectionism in my world, in my practice of talking with people as a psychologist, is a daily conversation. That people paralyze themselves and get themselves very distressed about, I've got to get it right. And if I don't get it right, bad things are going to happen. Okay, and obviously that then can move into things like, as I said before, the depressive and anxiety and obsessional and compulsive urges, which are at the very, very, very pointy end of this thinking style. When it moves into that kind of territory, obviously that's when perfectionism and that fear of failure takes over and paralyzes people's lives to the point that they can't get on with their daily activities. And that's when it does become a disordered behaviour, where it's important to seek some help.
Rochelle, you would get a lot of clients as well with, in terms of the perfectionism realm about body image and
very much
the impact of that.
Yeah, very much. It's and obviously, I mean, I would say, it's always been historically more women and young women particularly, but, the data's telling us with regard body image that young men are a particularly vulnerable group around that perfect body image, and it tends to appear more now in perfectionism with young men in bodybuilding, and the fitness industry is becoming really a dangerous place for young men about, the six-pack and being built, and that sadly then leads to steroid use for young men, because theirs is the opposite about, how big can I possibly get? Whereas young women, it tends to more manifest in, being a certain size, and that quest takes people down that terrible rabbit hole of eating disordered behaviour. Then, so it's a very hard. And I have over the years worked with lots and lots of young women with eating disordered behaviour, and it's an area that is very specialist, and a lot of therapists don't want to work in, because it's a very hard thing that once people have got an idea in their head about eating disordered behaviour, it's a very difficult one to move past. So it can be a very frustrating place for a therapist to work.
Also, in terms of presenting, just these days, getting your video out there to promote your own venture and so forth, a lot of ladies just don't get it out because
they're terrified.
Aspect, yeah.
If you sit in any of the business groups on Facebook, and I'm in quite a lot of them because it's actually a really useful place to watch people's dialogue as well. Women are terrified of doing the things like the Facebook Lives and the Instagram stories, because they're fearful of obviously not getting it right, whatever the hell that means. And I really urge you to question yourselves about, what does it actually mean? What are you actually saying to yourselves? Because oftentimes what we do is we get stuck in the first part of the story, and we just say to ourselves, I can't do that because I won't be able to get it right. And we don't often expand the story to say, what is that actually meaning to me that I can't get it right? That I'll or I'll or my sound might go funny, or I might have a double chin, or what is it that you're actually telling yourself? And then pushing that even further and asking yourselves, what's the risk of that happening? Like, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? And I'll go through more of these questions with you all in a few more slides about how to challenge those statements that you may come up with. So I guess then we think about, well, who's at risk of perfectionism? I think we all are. I think we all are at some level. We all have a bit of it in us, because we all fear not getting it right. And if you dig below that, we all fear at some level of failing, or being criticised, or condemned, or disappointing. Disappointing is a really big one. That I'm scared of disappointing people, because they expect so much of me. They expect me to be the person to get it right. So I want you to really check in with yourselves during this couple of hours and think, okay, what is my fear of if I don't get it exactly right? Who am I scared of disappointing? And some of you, as this slide, it's going to be childhood stuff. You know, it will take you back to when you disappointed a teacher and that teacher criticised you. It'll take you back to disappointing a parent. You know, this stuff is often so layered in old stories that where you learnt this from in the first place. And it's important to know that you know some of us will know, okay, I had a really critical parent or parents, or I had really critical teachers, or I had very high expectations. And some of that, you know, some of that is really tough and harsh stuff. And some of it is also about the perception that we heard from those people about, I've got to get it right. For instance, I've got a young woman that I've been working with for quite a long time, and she's a gorgeous young girl, and she's a very, very high achieving young lady, a very A-type personality, both academic, sport, music, performance. Every aspect of her world is high achieving, and she's always been used to getting the accolades all along the way. But at what cost? She's a perfectionist. She cannot tolerate error. She cannot tolerate not being at the top of the pile, to the point where it has led her to a place of eating disordered behaviour, self-harm, and just self-punishment constantly, because she fears failure so much, because she has no skill on how to do failure, and because she's never experienced it, because as a kid she was always top of the tree, you know, and therefore now the higher she now gets in her profession, which of course is one of those professions, it's medicine, and she's running into, I'm not the top of the tree, and therefore my perfectionism is getting higher and higher all the time. And you know, the bar just keeps getting raised around her, and she can't keep up. So, you know, it's a long work in progress for her to understand what's the risk of not being always at the top of the tree. And she's learning how to be average. You know, the couple of days ago we had a conversation. She said, I got my results back, and in 2 I was above average, and in 2 I was below average. And it was like, woohoo, yay. It was a huge celebration for her to learn how to just be in that high achieving group and not have to be the top of the class. And nothing bad happened. In fact, it was a revelation for her to go, oh my goodness, nothing bad happened. You know, I didn't get top of the class and nothing bad happened. And that's the question I want you all to be able to ask yourselves. So,
Rochelle, what is the role of image? You know, like image. The image is more important to some people than others. But the role
I guess, Rita, where that comes from, it's the same, I guess, in, you know, whether it be academic, sporting, music, performance, whatever. I think that often comes from the messages that you receive, you know, from when you were a little person and growing up is, oh, you're such a pretty little girl, or you're so lovely, or your hair's so beautiful, or, you know, your body's so fantastic, or, you know, all of those messages that as we're growing, we listen to very carefully and go, oh, okay, that's my value, that's my worth, that's how people see me, and I've got to sustain that. I've got to sustain that, because I don't know who else I am if I'm not that. So it's about understanding there's more to me than what I look like. There's more to me than my musical performance. There's more to me than my sporting performance. I am Rochelle, who is all of these other things, not just my incredible beauty. So, you know, that's often where image plays a role, Retha. And I think obviously there's much discussion out there in the social media world where we are seeing image, 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 image everywhere, and it's confronting to us to think, and especially why women then tend to not want to do Facebook Lives and so on and so forth, because they don't look as beautiful or as perfect or as young or as, you know, sexy, or whatever word you want to insert in there, as, you know, the chickie babe who just did the Facebook Live that I just watched, or the Insta story sitting on the beach drinking the cocktail in the bikini, living the lifestyle, or my background isn't as good. And you've noticed, ladies, both Retha and I have fake backgrounds because we want to look good, and I suppose some of that's about privacy too. But for me, it's about the room in which I'm in at the moment looks like a shit fest, and I don't particularly wish for you to all be exposed to that at the moment. So I've got my fake background happening, which probably for today I should have actually taken down, now that I've thought about it, and let you see my shit fest. And any of you ladies that have been on these calls with us before may remember a call I did a couple ago, where I had dogs and cats going crazy in the background and barking and meowing and fighting with each other on the floor underneath my feet, and it was just a bit of chaos. And that was actually good for us to see that. But it wasn't right. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. It was noisy. It was distracting. And but we still got on with it. We just did it. I'm noticing that there's lots of comments coming through, and I am just, Retha, are you keeping an eye on
the, that's fine. There's no
questions coming
it's
through
just,
that I'm just
no, I'll alert you if there's any
any
questions. I will alert you to it. It's just
awesome
comments that
share lovely
about their own experiences. Yeah,
thank you. Good. So, you know, we've sort of got segued away from this slide a bit, and that's okay. But it's just about noticing where some of our perfectionistic ideals come from, and like I said, you know, the line between perfectionism and just being attentive and high achieving. And I've just noticed the last thing I wrote on this slide is about the occupations in which we hope for perfection and that are more aligned with perfectionism, being military, medicine, accounting, in that you don't want, those professions are really running the gauntlet on, I've got to get it right because shit will happen if I don't get it right. And I'm having surgery on my wrist on tomorrow actually, and it's like, okay, well, I don't want a surgeon who's, you know, a bit sloppy. I want him to get it right. I want him to be perfect. But is that even achievable? Is it possible? No, of course it's not. And saying I want him to be perfect is a ridiculous statement. I want him to do his best and be mindful and attentive and you know, check his processes as he goes along. So, you know, we set people up to fail with our expectations of them. So it's not only our own perfectionism, our own dialogue about ourselves, but also what we project out there onto other people that can become a societal issue. So as we've talked through, and we've probably covered a lot of these points as we've gone along, ladies, that perfectionism stems from a complex group of possibilities, and it's always been in the world of psychology about how much is nature and how much is nurture. So some of our perfectionistic traits are going to be a heritable component, so they're what we get from our family. And as to how much of that is from our family via our heritability, our genetics, versus how much is actually the environment in which we grew up and watching the people around us and going, oh, I better do that really, really well because Dad always does it really, really well, and he gets really angry at himself if he doesn't get it exactly right. So I have to get it exactly right. Otherwise, you know, he'll be disappointed and I'll be disappointed and bad things will happen. But often we don't expand the story about bad things will happen. Okay, well, what are these bad things that are going to happen? You know, have you ever actually stopped and asked yourself the question about, okay, well, if if bad things happen, what's the worst thing that could happen, possibly happen in that situation that you're arguing with yourself about? So, as I've said along the way, perfection actually ends up being based in our sense of self, our self-worth. And we use our academics, our performance, our self-image, our profession, our wealth, all of these things as measures of our worth in comparison to other people usually. And therefore it becomes, well, if I'm not getting those things, if I'm not as good as, our conversation last month about comparisonitis and keeping up with the Joneses, if I'm not as good as Mary Bloggs down the road, I'm a failure and I may as well give up. So it leads into that all or nothing and catastrophic thinking style of it's disastrous, it's the end of the world. I want to just quickly note, because in the literature around perfectionism, of course, there is going to be the challenge of the value of perfection, the value of the striving for perfection, and there's a lot of research, particularly around elite athletes. There's a lot of research around the striving. And even just the use of the word perfection, about striving for perfection, that it's a motivator. And I think that's a really important point, that striving for perfection is a useful motivator because it keeps people going. I mean, you think about, there was a particular piece of research and they included Serena Williams. And that notion, I mean, she's not a very good example because she chucks a tantrum if she doesn't get it perfect. But it was about elite tennis players and elite athletes in general who are the top of their tree. They're the world champions, they're the Olympic gold medalists, they've reached every goal that they can possibly attain. How do they stay motivated? And often they use that language about, I'm striving for perfection. Every inch of betterness, for want of a better word, is what keeps them going. But those folks have often done a lot of mindset work in what they classify as their own perfection, about I'm chasing just this little bit extra. And obviously, as I said, there's a fine line between where that perfectionism is a positive motivator and keeps you chasing the goals versus tipping you over the edge, and Serena Williams is having a tantrum on the tennis court because she didn't get the shot or whatever it might be, and how much pressure that is then on that person to achieve, and also the pressure we put on those people in those spaces as well. The expectation we have of our sports people as they've got to win all the time. They've got to be perfect all the time because they can. They've proven it. So it's a big area in that elite sports world. So ladies, I challenge you. This is now, I guess, the perfection versus action, because we want to move from that space to taking imperfect action. We want to get movement rather than analysis paralysis and being stuck in the overwhelm. So the questions I want to ask you about that, when you think about taking imperfect action, is what is the risk if I take the action? Whatever your action might be in your business, what is the risk of me taking this action and moving forward? Versus the second question I want you to ask yourself is, what is the risk of me not taking the action, okay? Of just stopping and sitting and stewing. What's the risk of doing that? And it's an interesting question that I often ask people about what's the risk of taking action versus not taking action. And they'll say, well, there isn't really a risk. And it's a bit of a, okay, well, if you didn't do it, if you didn't do the thing, what would happen? Well, the thing wouldn't get done, obviously. And you'll say, you know, when you look at it rationally, well, there isn't really a risk, is there? Like, what's the risk of me putting this presentation out this morning that's full of typos? I mean, you might think I'm an idiot. But there's usually what we call a secondary gain from your inaction, which is it protects you. Your overwhelm protects you, your paralysis protects you. It protects you from being possibly criticised. It protects you from being of failing. So it serves a purpose. So it has a funky kind of end result to it. And once we check out that, then I guess there's another layer of questions around that about going, okay, well, what can I do to help myself check out, you know, okay, well, what's the worst thing that would happen? Take it to the absolute worst scenario, and can I live with that? And work backwards from there. Because if you can live with the worst case scenario, you can live with everything else backwards from that. So, Retha, you know, you're saying you've got all these balls in the air and you don't know where to start, and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and can't get any of it right. What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the worst thing? You drop one of the balls and you disappoint a student, or you disappoint a colleague or your boss, and they give you a bit of a serve. Okay, so yes, you'll feel uncomfortable. You'll feel a bit silly or a bit embarrassed. Can you live with that? That's the question to ask yourself. And then what can you take from that? And going, okay, well, you know, I can live with a margin of error. Okay, and this is about self-compassion. Okay, about learning how to be kind to you and not just sitting in the criticism of self. And that's where that very first slide that I showed you, that affirmation card with all those errors. And we can be kind, can't we? We go, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, it's all cool. And, you know, we turn it into, oh, well, you know, that person, that mega businessman has got errors and doesn't matter. So why can't we use that kindness, ladies, with ourselves? You know, why do we allow ourselves to criticize ourselves and set ourselves up to fail when we are willing to let other people take imperfect action? I think that's a really, really pertinent question. And the answer usually is because it's playing on the record in our brain that we don't even realise half the time is playing in the background. We just let it keep playing and we don't challenge it because it's such a habitual record that we've had playing for so long. And if we actually just caught ourselves going, oh, I'm being really mean to myself, and if I actually said this out aloud, what would somebody else say to me? If they heard me saying it, they'd stop. And if you heard one of your friends saying, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, you're such a loser, and you know, when you did that presentation, it was really messy and you ummed and ahed a lot, you wouldn't let your friend criticize themselves like that, would you? You'd intervene and go, hey, come on, give yourself a break. So ladies, stop, catch the thinking, and think, what would you say if somebody else was saying this to you? You'd be kind, you'd be compassionate. So give yourself the same permission.
Rochelle, we've got two comments here with a question. So one here that says, for me, it's very hard to let that rebuke go and to not replay it in my mind over and over. How do we accept it and shrug it off and move on?
Okay, good question. Really good question. Because that is often the case of it. It just plays over and over and over again. And often when we're replaying scenarios or situations over again, we're often looking for a solution, and to try and fix it, to alleviate ourselves from the discomfort of it. And obviously that's why we replay things. And often the first part of that is the problem solving, where we actually go, okay, well, I need to take something from this, something that's useful. So that's the problem solving part of the first part of overthinking. Okay, we need to do it so that we actually address the situation. But then once we start just chewing on it and ruminating and going over and over and over again, it's important to catch yourself in the act of doing that and going and being compassionate again and asking yourself the question of, okay, what's the value of my repeating this over and over again? What am I looking for? Okay, and oftentimes you'll be looking for relief. And each of you will know this, because it's a different thing if you ask yourself the question that you're looking for some kind of, oftentimes it's control. Oftentimes we're looking for a way of fixing it so that it never happens again. And if you look at control, when we need to control situations, it's usually because we're scared. So we're trying to protect ourselves from being scared and from failing and being exposed. So I hope that answers that question.
And there's another question here. Do you think there is a gender bias in that, the imperfectionism?
I can't tell you from a research perspective whether there is. There certainly is, as I said, in the way in which perfectionism then leads into a diagnosis of, particularly around body image and anxiety, where women are definitely more prone to eating disordered behaviours and anxiety related behaviours, for sure. So I mean, that's at the pointy end. So I suppose you could take from that end to say, yes, probably women are probably more prone to perfectionism, but I can't give you an exact answer to this end of the spectrum. Is there anything else in there?
No, that's all good.
Okay, cool. So I want to just quickly, because we're probably moving into the next segment time, but ladies, I want you to design your own imperfect adventure, which is about using some of these ideas that I've got here to help yourselves challenge your imperfection. And some of that, the ways in which we can do that are about, the first one is reevaluating your standards. And what that means is noticing where your standards are out of whack. And the ways in which we can do that is looking at what other people are doing and how, and we've talked a bit about this in the light of compassion, and looking at other people and noticing, well, they're getting away with that, so it mustn't be that bad. And if you look at my presentation today, and I want to check in with you, how many of you got triggered by my presentation today that was chock full of typos and different fonts and not in alignment and different colours and just a bit of an all over the place? And how many of you noticed those things? How many of you went, oh my God, I need to correct those typos, I can't stand it? And then what did you think of me when you saw those? Did you judge me? Be honest. We'll ask that question in a minute when we move into talking about our experience, but I'll be really interested to know, were you kind to me? Or did you judge me? Or did you just think, oh, Rochelle's being a twit and she's just tricked us, and my little game hasn't worked very well at all? But the other part of designing your imperfect adventure is to hypothesis test. So I want you to try to do things like I've done today, which is send things out into the world or do things that are testing what it's like to do something when it's not exactly right, and see what happens. See what happens. Did the earth come crashing down? What's the worst thing that could happen as a result of sending something out? So Retha, I want you to grab one of those balls that you're trying to juggle and just do it and send it and see what happens. And be uncomfortable and sit with it and check in with yourself, but be kind.
Great idea. I'll be sending those 2 articles out in the next couple of days.
Oh, yeah, good. Because remember, it's oftentimes the perfectionism stuff is usually other people don't even know about it. You know, you'll send those articles out, Retha, and most of the time people will receive them and read them and go, yep. There'll be some people that'll pick out bits and pieces of it, and that might be useful. But you've also got to remember that perfectionism is about our own stuff as well. So when we view other people's articles, for instance, and if we go, oh, Retha didn't put a comma here and she wrote that sentence really long and I don't really agree with that statement, it's a reflection on the reader as well about what is the reader wanting us to know about themselves when they want to comment on that sort of thing as well. Do they want to show us that they're better than we are, basically? You know, so there's a whole host of information that we can take from other people's perception of our imperfection as well. Okay, so I want you to challenge your perfectionistic thoughts as well, which is the should. I want you to catch your shoulds. That's a really important one because, like I said, should means that there's a rule. There's a rule in there somewhere. Whose rule is it and why the bloody hell is it still here? If it's a childhood rule, why are you still using it? Okay, and I want you to expose yourself to imperfection. A lot of my clients will walk into my room and there's a couple of pictures hanging on the wall, and every so often they just get off centre and they're crooked. And they'll sit there and they'll look at them and they'll go, Rochelle, that picture's crooked. And I go, yeah, okay, picture's crooked. And it's a struggle. I need to straighten the picture, Rochelle. No, the picture won't be straightened. And so the picture stays crooked. And honest to God, it triggers people so strongly. So the picture stays crooked. The messy house, do things like that, leave things, walk out of the house, your shirt's not ironed. Woohoo! Go you. So, and allow yourself to not know, okay? That it sounds a bit funny, and to be wrong, okay? And what that means is perfectionists often get themselves caught up in needing to have the answers all the time because people expect that of them. And therefore, it's important to give yourself permission to just say, I don't know what the answer is. Let's find out together. So is that okay? Of course it is. It's better than being, saying something that's not exactly right. Allow yourself the discomfort of not knowing. Okay? So I've crammed a lot in these slides this week. These are some of the questions I want you to check in with yourselves that I've actually probably already used along the way, but I want you to check some of these questions with yourselves. Read through. I wonder if it might be, ladies, if you want copies of some of these slides, if that's
I'll send copies of the slides.
Yeah. Because some of these are actually good checkpoints to ask that we probably don't really have much time now to launch into these in detail today.
I'll send it out with them.
But these are all about catching yourself, catching your thinking and challenging your thinking, ladies, and working out what the value of some of your thoughts are for you. So without further ado, we're going to talk with Callan this morning, and we're going to hear about what happened when your seemingly perfect world, Callan, gets turned upside down by numerous different events. And Callan's going to tell us about her process of coming out of the perfect image of the woman who kept all the balls in the air, and suddenly they all got dropped, and she's now a work in progress of recalibrating all of those things, including her name, which is a story in and of itself. So welcome, Callan.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm a bit of a crier actually, and through that talk, some of those points resonated so much with me, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, you know, I've put mascara on and half a kilo of makeup for this top. Am I going to have mascara running down my face? Which just built on the chaotic morning I had. I've been asking for, I don't know, 10 years for a house yard fence, and the workmen have been fencing about 10 k's away. And today, of all mornings, at about 9:45, they decided to start digging the post holes only 20 metres out the window. So I placed out there, tripped over, got myself covered in mud and dirt, and yeah. Anyway, I'm here.
As I said to Callan when we talked just before we started this morning, it would have been lovely to see her covered in mud and dirt, taking imperfect action as well. But that, you know, we all want to present our best selves, don't we? But it's like me having a shit fest of a room behind me, but covering it up with a very beautiful background. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, Callan, it would be a privilege for the ladies to hear this morning about your process, about what has happened for you, that you've gone from someone who went about your life about having everything all lined up and doing everything for everyone and being the person in everyone's world, and then all of a sudden having all of those balls that you kept in the air dropped or taken away from you or kicked down to the far end of the paddock and covered in mud, and you having to then reinvent yourself.
Sure. So I guess it started in about April 2015. Our farm at that stage was in a valley, and we had about 4 years worth of rain in about 4 hours, and 3 rivers collided. Our little town went under. My son's pony drowned. We lost a lot of stock. We lost a lot of fencing, and it still resonates now because it was something that was just so out of control. It was something that I couldn't hang on to and I couldn't fix. We ended up losing 3 people from our town. They drowned during that horrible early morning flood. And then we went straight into hailstorms. Then we went into a plague of locusts that came and decimated all of our lucerne that we'd finally got back. Our flats had got back into a sowable condition. And then we've gone into 4 years of drought. And I guess also in that drought, my husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore. So he left. And part of me learning to cope with all of this has, and I promised myself I wouldn't cry. Oh my gosh, I thought I'd gone past this.
I'm sending you virtual tissues right now to wipe your mascara up.
Thank you. I'm glad I've got glasses on. Maybe it'll hide it for me.
Yeah.
And part of all of these things happening, you know, it compounded, you know, everything happened one after another. And I was lucky enough to get a job to support my son and I, and then that job ended. And that's when I ran out of energy. I ran out of everything to maintain my mask. I ran out of everything to be what I had allowed myself to believe was right. And that's the thing that I didn't realize is that this perception, and whether it was external pressure or internal pressure, I think it's probably a combination of both. But that vulnerability, and part of my vulnerability is letting you see into this crazy lounge room today, this tiny little cottage that we've now got, is quite freeing. It's something that allows us to shake the entrenched beliefs that we have about ourselves, that we allow society to dictate to us, and it allows us to well, for me, I had to go back and identify my values. And it's funny because I teach this stuff. I was very much, as Retha said, I was the chameleon, but I was also very much about do what I say, not what I do. So I had to go back and really sit down and think, what are the values that are driving me? And something that I really value is unconditional love. It's so important to me. But if I wasn't being real, if I wasn't allowing that perfect mask to drop, how can I give that unconditional love to everyone else? It's a real, it's a paralysis, I found. Perfectionism is a paralysis. It's something that didn't allow me to move forward. It didn't allow me to develop, and I guess I got stuck in those ruts, in those different different molds.
So when you're really, really busy keeping your mask on to be that perfect or seemingly perfect person for everyone else, what happened to you, as in you as an individual?
Yeah, that's something that I didn't even notice disappearing away.
Yeah.
I was absolutely lost. I didn't feature in anyone's decisions. I didn't even feature in my decisions.
Yeah.
I was trying to be the perfect wife. I was trying to be the perfect mother. I was trying to be the perfect pony club mum. I was trying to be the perfect show committee person. You know, I was doing it all. And each of these skins, each of these masks that I'd wear, you know, was great for that entity or organisation or person, but certainly didn't give anything to me.
What have you learnt since then now about when you've had to take some of those, well, even have some of those masks ripped off, which is agonising? It's
really agonising. It's a really, really difficult process. And something that I learned is it's okay to go to the wall. I guess if I'm honest, I did my job and I got my son and our foster children fed and clothed into school over the last 2 years. But other than that, I just watched TV. I couldn't function. I couldn't see the positive in anything. I couldn't, there was no interest. And so I guess cutting, and then that was another thing I felt guilty about because I wasn't being perfect in my grief, you know.
Yeah. Bless your cotton socks, hey? How do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah, exactly.
We even set a framework about how that should be done, hey?
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't until, it was actually the farrier that said to me one day, he said, "Oh, I'm so sick of this bloody moping look on your face. What's going on?" And our farrier is a bit austere. You know how most farriers sort of will talk for hours. This one's get in, get the job done and get out. Anyway, he finished the 4 horses, sat down one day and he said, "This is ridiculous. What's going on?" And I told him a little bit and he said, "Give yourself a timeline." He said, "I've been through it. For me, it was 2 years." And it's funny. And it was just that simple thing, putting a framework around it. And it nearly was to the day 2 years that I was able to get up and go again. And that, coming back to those values, on that day, I watched a movie called, the war horse, and not the war horse, the war room. And I also went back to my values, back to the course that I was teaching at the time, and said, right, what is important to me? What do I want to do? And I thought, all of this lived experience, what makes me happy? What fills my cup? And the biggest thing for me that fills my cup is when I gather women, you know, when I'm seeing them and I'm building them and I'm teaching them and I'm helping them to discover their strengths and their traits and what drives them, how they identify their values and what drives them forward.
Isn't that amazing? You know, it's about, you have to take all of those perfect masks off to then identify what is actually real. And there comes the power. There comes the rawness, the vulnerability, but also from that comes the resilience and comes the creation. It's like the phoenix rising from the ashes, isn't it? That comes out of it then. And you can even hear the change in your voice and see the change in your face when you say, then I learned what is important to me. And I love working with women and I love helping other people and growing other people. And, you know, out of all of that, those layers and layers of just being like this, you know, this dummy out in the world with this big smile and a certain face for this organisation and a certain face for that organisation, that then you had to take all those masks off and strip yourself down to bare, raw bones. That then comes probably the best thing will ever be.
Yeah, it was growth. It was it was understanding. I mean, even simple things like, you know, how many people cook eggs for their family each morning and cook them the way their family likes them, but never ever do it the way they like. It's bizarre. I love scrambled eggs with parsley. Didn't even know that. Everybody in my house likes crispy eggs or boiled eggs or eggs with their bacon or toad in the hole or whatever they want. But nobody likes scrambled eggs, so I never ever did it. You know, isn't that silly?
It's so true though, isn't it? And I'll bet, my goodness, that's such a gorgeous little phrase, ladies, to grab hold of and go away today and walk around and just go, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for everybody else? What do I like?
Yeah.
Check in.
Yeah, and do that, check in. I've also now got a thing called, I had it here to show you. Oh, that's right. It's called my burn journal. It's probably back to front. And I write all of the things that I don't want anybody else to see. And then in the fire, if it's something that I'm really scared of, I'll burn it. But if not, it stays in the book. So I can acknowledge that, that fear, because I really like what you said, Rochelle, about perfectionism is the fear of failure. And I do have pretty high standards for myself, and I still do. I think that's just part of me. But understanding that and acknowledging those things that happen throughout the day or throughout, you know, whatever time it is, that you write them down, and when you actually face them, like you've said, you know, what is the value of your thoughts? Write them down. They're so important. But then if they're too scary to leave in the book, you've got them out of your head and then they're gone.
Yeah. It's a really powerful technique that's to be encouraged, is to catch, you know, and often I use those words. It's about catching your thoughts and checking them for whether or not they are actually rational, useful, helpful thoughts, or whether they're just ruminations over and over and over again, repetitive, habitual, chewing thoughts. And writing it down really helps, because then you can write it all out, write it out. And then often, you know, sometimes if you go back and even just with a highlighter and just go, and, you know, be a bit objective and look at it a bit from the distance as if you were somebody else reading it, and go, oh my God, that's really cruel. Oh my God, that's really awful. I can't believe I treat myself that way. And then, like you said, that's the burn journal, and go, I'm going to start again. Get rid of that shit. Yeah. Throw that in the fire. that's cruel, and you wouldn't, not only would you not want anybody else to read it because it's so personal, but you wouldn't want to read it again either because it's just mean to you. So it's almost symbolic and ritualistic to say, I'm getting rid of this. I'm drawing a line in the sand, and I'm getting rid of those thoughts.
And it frees up so much more space. I'm a hanger-onerer, whether it's to emotion or people or situations, or I had a beautiful tree in our old farm in the front yard, a big old fig, and that was my tree. I'd go and when nobody was around, I'd go and climb it and hide up there and sort out the world. And that's something for a long time I missed that, but I realised it was only a physical thing. It could easily be transported into, I can have another space. So the value in hanging on to things that are no longer serving you, I needed to identify that and let it go. And part of that burn journal was is letting that go.
It's great stuff. Tell us about, Callan, where, now that you are in the next chapter, that you're starting to reinvent, and you're having to reinvent without all the masks, without all the perfect image stuff that you spoke of, the pony club mum and the P&C and the wife and the mother and the right down to the eggs. Tell us how you are helping yourself now to just get shit done.
Yeah, it's hard because I how I'm getting stuff done now is I have a saying that's on my wall, and it's a Toby Mac saying, and his philosophy is all about speak life. And the quote goes, "Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Tiptoe if you must, but take that step."
Perfect. Great. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how I'm doing it. It is, so, in the WiRE program, I love the WiRE program, and I have a beautiful mentor in that called Tara. And when she dobbed me in for this, I thought, oh, crap, I don't have anything ready. I don't have social media ready. I don't have website ready. I don't have, I can't do this. I don't have anywhere to direct people to. So I got, in a week, a Facebook page up, an Instagram account up, a landing page for a website up. And then I thought, oh, I've got no content. What do? It doesn't look like I'm valid. It doesn't look like I'm a justified businesswoman. I can't do this. These people are going to look at me and judge me and think, social media legitimate, what's the word?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah, that one.
Us in business and as people sometimes, and I didn't have it. So I quickly, did some posts and tossed them up there, and, they're there. Nobody's liked them or engaged with them, but they're there. So,
You filled the space. Yeah.
I filled the space, yeah. So jump on and like them, please. But I took that step and I got it done and I released it, and it's not perfect and it's not brilliant, but it's out there and it's a start. And that's the thing, is that I find that once I take that one step and I've started and I get in that space, I'm just so engrossed in it. And I love doing it. That fear's gone because that first hurdle, that first barrier is broken.
And often that first hurdle is in your head, isn't it? And that's, like we talked about before, that whole, it's all got to be perfect all at once, or I can't do it at all. And like you said, you just went blah, 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 and sprayed some because you had a deadline to meet. And it just shows how much time we spend also in the procrastination of, I've got to get it right, I've got to get it right. And when you're forced into a corner with a deadline, you take action, don't you? Because you've got no choice. And you can't get caught up in it's got to be right. It's got to be whatever right is. God only knows. I've no idea what right actually is. But you do it. So deadlines are fantastic for that reason.
And what you said then, what is right? What is right? It's something that we either accept as an external pressure or an external measurement.
And in the social media world, it's almost as if we're waiting for the Facebook police to come along and go, well, your website, your Facebook page looks like shit. You need to be kicked out of Facebook now. And your Instagram posts are terrible. So you've been eliminated, you know. Where do we get these ideas from that Facebook and in the social media world out there particularly, that bad things are going to happen if we don't get it right? Is there a memo from Facebook that says how you've got to do it?
Yeah.
No, there's only a memo from me how I've got to do it. I wrote my own memo.
Yeah. So
and be careful what's in your memo, ladies. How about that's part of your homework, I think, is write yourself a new memo.
Yeah.
Okay? Get shit done.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I find really helps me is the kick principle. Has anyone heard of that before? Okay, so grab a bit of paper, everyone, and grab a pen and draw a circle that takes up about half of the page and nearly touches the outside of the pages. And then about a third of the way in, draw another circle. And then at the centre, draw quite a small circle. Have we got that? So that first circle, write number 1 in it. And that's our circle of concern. And that's stuff that we're concerned about.
Is that the outer circle, Colin?
The outer circle, yep, the outer circle. And that's huge, and that's stuff we want to be concerned about. It's stuff we want to make changes in it. But in reality, we've got none or very little influence in that. So then come into the next circle and write number 2. And that's our circle of influence. And we've got some influence in that area. It's not as big a circle, it's a bit smaller. But, you know, it might be worth spending a little bit of time on stuff in there. But then come into that centre circle, that one that's pretty small, and write number 3. And that's our circle of control. And that's the stuff that we can actually make a difference to. You know, so we've got the choice of where we spend our time. And so we can either faff about, I generally say something else because I quite love swearing, you know, in those big circles, or we can get focused and, you know, direct where we want to put our energies and have a look at that circle number 3 and then identify what goes into each of those circles for us. You know, so for me, does it really matter if Sam doesn't have on his Ariat shirt for Pony Club, you know, because I'll be worried about what people will think of me? You know, yes, in the past, but now, fuck it, you know. In the circle of influence, you know, show committee. I've got 400 students coming and they don't all have the same colour pens. I mean, these are really superficial examples, but we don't need any more tears now. You know, I can influence, yep, maybe I can go out and put in an order from Office Works. It'll take 10 days to get here and I can influence that, but does it really matter? But what's important, you know, is it important for me to have put in the hard yards with my horses so that I can perform at the level I want to, but not to achieve the gold medal or the, you know, the trophy for everyone else to see, but to know that I'll have a working horse that will come back and will be more effective in what I need it to do in the paddock. You know, that's something that I can control and that's something I can influence and that's something that's important to me. So that's where I want to spend that time. So it's a really good tool to, you know, a quick tool to figure out where we put our energies and our thoughts.
Love it. Yeah, it's good. It's nice and simple, and it's a good perspective to catch ourselves in the act of overworking things and wasting time, effort, and energy on things that are, as you say, outside of our control. So why are we why are we even going there in the first place?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So that's a good practical advice to give to the ladies, to help them in letting go of some of the things that we do spend so much time on that really have no importance. Because that's the other thing, I guess, in this stuff, is that we spend so much time in that outer circle of concern. And it's usually, it's either on really big things that are way outside of our control, or it's on minutiae, it's on crap that doesn't actually matter in the long run. Like I said, the example of, obsessing over a logo. It really doesn't matter in the long run. Who gives a shit? It's the content that people are going to, it's your product, it's your service, it's what you provide. It's the core ingredient that people come to you for, not because you've got a logo that's the right shade of green.
Put the energy and effort into working on your personal brand rather than your.
That's exactly right.
That's
exactly right. Yes, because we can all get caught up in all of that minutiae as some level of importance that in the long run nobody notices.
Kellen, before you continue, can we quickly come back to your name?
Yes, thank you, Rita.
You've made the decision to kind of change your name or just tweak it, and tell us a little bit about that decision making as to what led to that and why and what it means to you.
Yeah. So I guess part of my history was that everybody else dictated probably 99% of the content of my world. And my birth name is actually Callan, but nobody could ever pronounce it, or they misinterpret it for Karen. And, I guess I grew up in the 70s or the late 70s, and, Karen was a popular name. And I just let it run because that's what everybody called me. So I didn't have the strength or I don't know what it was, the self-worth to say that's actually wrong. But part of this process for me now, and particularly now that those Karen memes are coming out, oh my gosh, they're just the worst. I just thought, it started about 18 months ago, so before the memes, but I just thought, I want to take back me, and I want to find out who I am, and I want to find out what I like, and I want to find out what I want to be called. What is the first thing that people see about me is generally your name, and for me, I want to build my character strengths, my heart, and my me around a name that I resonate with, and Callan is what resonates for me. So I'm taking it back, and I'm going to build me on that foundation.
It's so important, isn't it, to actually identify this is who I am, and I'm backing myself.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm gonna challenge you. My name isn't Karen, it's Callan. Yeah,
and I still add to it. Most people call it, call me that, and for a long time I haven't done anything about it. So
no, but as you say, it's such an important part of your process to say this is who I am.
Yeah,
I'll know who I am. Yeah. I've just noticed Mandy has asked a question. Mandy, can you unmute yourself and just help me understand your question a little more, please?
Yeah, it was just so empowering hearing about these circles. But what popped in my head was that thing, Rochelle, you spoke about, was I think we tend to procrastinate or put off something we value, as in working on these circles and defining what's in our circles. And so then maybe that's linked with perfectionism, because we want to put everything perfectly in a circle, which in turn may be a control or lack of control things.
Mm,
So
mm.
that's what I'm trying to say, is like, how do we navigate ourselves into that space? Because it was so helpful. Callan, I want to say Kaylin actually, because I think that sounds nice. But yeah, so that was why I asked the question.
Okay. Callan, do you want to talk about the circles in there? And I think that's more your thing.
Mandy, what I'd encourage you to do is to in a column, say down the side or on the bottom of the page, write those things that you're worried about where they'll go. So it might be kids' activities, meal planning, how much time do I spend on self-care each week? How much time do I do my husband's things? How much time do I give to the farm? How much time do I give to my corp? You know, whatever the things are that you want to list. And really, really quickly, without, you know, putting a second thought into it, draw a line to the circle draw a line to the circle and let it happen. And I would guess that instinctively you will show your, you know, surface level self where they should sit. I find that if we get caught up, we can get tangled in these things a bit, you know, worried about where, you know, getting back into that perfection thing, you know, where should they sit? What should they do? What should they look like? All the rest of it, but do it quickly, and see what comes of it. Does that help? Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to the next segment, just as a finish up note, Callan, have you got a few words of wisdom to summarize your process around perfectionism for us?
I would say take some time to allow yourself to go on the journey. Give yourself space and room to do the thinking and the feeling. If you go to the wall or the floor or the shower or whatever happens, if you do that collapse, that's okay. Let it happen. Try not to rush into decisions. Try not to be influenced by things that don't resonate with you. If it feels uncomfortable to you, it's probably a jolly good reason for that. And putting in those boundaries, learning to say no. So that's actually to summarize it, be intentional with your yeses, be intentional with your nos, and be intentional with your life.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for being willing to engage with all of us today and being willing to show us your runny mascara.
My
God, I love runny mascara.